Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Chapter 18 in continuing in Revelation is a continuation of not exactly the description of Babylon, but now the description of Babylon's fall. You remember in 14, this was chapter 14 or 15, whatever, between the two of them, sometimes I have trouble distinguishing because in my mind they're just one song. Babylon has fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So this is the description of her in her fallen state. And in a sense, obviously, the apostasy literally means we say falling away, but actually, literally, it's standing off. But it's interesting that it's translated because in English we think in terms of a fall, right? A fall from grace, a fall from faith. Just as Satan fell from heaven. Because we always think in terms of to do better and to improve is to ascend and to go up the heights, but to fall is to tumble downwards. And obviously her fall comes earlier in a sense of by becoming the whore is a fall. But the whore in her way becomes exalted through her relationship with the dragon, the Antichrist, the king of Babylon. She is Mystery Babylon. In a spiritual sense, the wife of the king of Babylon, who is and who is and who was always symbolized by the king of Babylon, or whose symbol always has pointed to Satan, being one of the chief enemies of God's people in the Old Testament, the king of Babylon. So let's read it. Revelation 18:1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So, much to say about the angel, the description, powerful glory, lighting the earth. Anything I have to say as far as like identification would be speculation. He cries with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. It's duplicated. To emphasize, and also, like I said, there's like they fell before they were Babylon. They fell to become Babylon, and fell as Babylon also, in that when the Lord returns, the illusion of their exaltation with Satan becomes revealed as the degradation it truly is. In whoredoms there is a sort of glory. It seems like glamorous, and they look beautiful, and the money is thrown at them, but at the end of the day, it's humiliating, of ill repute, and there's no glory in it, no matter how you slice it. People, they try to take pride in shameful things in the world. People do. They have pride parades in shameful things they ought to be ashamed of, they're proud of, to make themselves feel good. But no matter how you slice it, you could say you're proud all day. It's a shameful thing. all those things, because it's like they misuse things that are meant for blessing and use them to bring themselves down. And Mystery Babylon, of course, she glories in her fornication. She has become the habitation of devils. She thought she was the habitation of angels. Now she looks around and sees devils. I wasn't inhabited by angels. I was the habitation of devils. Foul spirits. What are the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, etc., whatever. I haven't memorized those, I confess. I remember love, joy, peace. And the works of the flesh being contrary, murders, fornication, adulteries, that type of thing. And that's from Galatians 5 or 6, somewhere in there. But the point is, instead of being filled with good spirits, or the spirits of good things, the spirits of just men made perfect, instead, what she is filled with is the spirits of the foul. Foul spirits. Hateful spirits. Is what she does is out of hatred and out of uncleanness. Well, hateful. Well, interestingly, she has a hold of every foul spirit. A hold, some sort of stronghold, right? The stronghold where foul spirits dwell. And, I'm not going to Babylon, I could every study recapitulate what Babylon is. It's the apostasy. It's that. And I'm just going to say that. But the justification for that has been given throughout all the studies in Revelation. She is a stronghold of foul spirits. A cage. Now, a hold is like a stronghold, but a cage is like a prison of unclean and hateful birds, because birds would like to fly away. That's not a good analogy, right? But is that which holds. A stronghold is, because here's the thing. I can think back to Hezekiah, when he was besieged by the king of Assyria. I believe in the Assyrian inscriptions, he was described as a bird in a cage. A stronghold is a place of strength, but it is also a prison. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the problems with fixed defenses, right? Because your fixed defenses defend your life from being destroyed, but they also become this sort of like, I can't go outside of this, otherwise I'll be killed. And that's what Babylon is revealed to be. People enter into Babylon for safety. Oh, I don't want to be persecuted in the end times. I don't want to be persecuted. So I will go along with the crowd. I will go along with what everyone's doing, which is worshiping the dragon. Now, it's not going to seem to be the dragon, but he's going to seem to be fair, of course. He's going to seem to be fair. He's going to seem to be, fair in the sense of beautiful, desirable. He will come disguised as an angel of light. Even though there's going to be, not obviously outwardly necessarily to the people who are sucked up in it, but there will be iniquity in it, of course. Like I said, it's like he will use people's sinful desires, and the way Satan always does, to manipulate and control them. And see, unclean and hateful birds will fly to this stronghold of Babylon in the end times, because in the midst of the signs of the end, are going to be fearful, and men's hearts are going to be failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are on the world. So to join up with the church or wherever whatever the great whore, wherever the great whore is, wherever she is represented in reality and not symbolically, wherever, that is where men will seek to go. But not the best men, of course, because the best of men are going to see the wickedness of this. I watched for some reason, I know why. It's I get recommendations from atheist channels, which are interesting to me. And a lot of people don't have any interest in that. That's fine, but it's an interesting thing to see what people think. And like always, like they portray themselves. They think so highly of themselves. They love themselves. They love them. And it was a cartoon where they were portraying like several people dying and then going into the heavens, space somewhere, and then they meet God on some strange planet somewhere. And for some, that's their idea of heaven, I guess, because they still take it literally. Heaven has to be a material place. You know what I mean? Like he's out there in the material world. And they also made God very human. And they made him very human, material, though the implication is that they're dead, so this is some sort of spiritual thing, but they still put them in a material place. And God comes forward, and he's a man, completely a man, and has nothing special about him. But he says, I am the Lord your God, and there's a Muslim, a Christian, and an atheist. It's like a joke. A Muslim and a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar, or they meet God. And when God, I am the Lord your God, the Muslim and the Christian immediately fall on their faces and worship God. But the atheist kind of stands there like all cocky, even the facial expression he put on the atheist, like defiant and proud. And so, they think that is how, and whatever, and of course God likes the atheist and chews out the Christian and the Muslim. Especially for bowing, which is funny. So they think that in the presence of the supernatural, they're going to just stand there with the chin up, defiant. They don't think that they will be the most blubbering, sobbing, simpering, groveling of all. They don't think that that's how the aspect they will take upon themselves. They're kidding themselves. They've never confronted real power. See, they show God, I am the Lord your God. Well, it's just words. Yeah, if I go into a grocery store and some dude comes up to me, just all mundane, and says, I am the Lord your God, I'm going to be skeptical too. I ain't going to be like, oh, fall on my face. It's interesting. Just out of nowhere, you just expect that whatever you see is the Lord your God. If God appeared to me in such a mundane way, I don't know that I would instinctively bow either. Satan isn't going to come like that. He's going to come, I am the Lord your God, and he will bring down fire from heaven, and the sea and the waves roaring, the men's hearts failing them for fear, and he will appear in the midst of all this turmoil and offer salvation, relief, just become the whore. And people will flood into the whore to become that. It's not just the apostate church. It is the apostate church, and the whole world sort of becomes Christian. Or whatever, like I've said, they don't truly become Christian, but they become Christian, they become in name. And certainly Satan could take on different aspects to different people in parts of the world, if that was expedient. I am also the opinion that honestly, whatever he says out of the heavens, if it's a supernatural entity, if it's a mundane human, he's going to have to really work the deceit angle as far as speaking different things to different people, speaking out of both sides of his mouth. If he is a human possessed by a spirit, that's going to be harder to deceive people. But if he's a supernatural entity and has literally miracle powers to do wonders, and the people will marvel and they will see him as a pragmatically good thing, they will flood into them. And into him will flood all the hateful, into her, I should say. Into the whore shall come all these people, the hateful, the unclean, foul, every foul spirit, every unclean and hateful bird. And birds, what is the... There are many ways that birds are used symbolically. Like I think immediately of, as birds flying shall the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem and protect it. Isaiah 40s. But also, birds can be unclean. They can be as, like little messengers that a bird told me. A bird little flitted here, flitted there. They can have that sense of from branch to branch, sort of the idea of indecision can be wrapped up in the idea of a bird. And of course, when we talk about unclean birds, hateful birds, I start thinking of the parable of the sower again, which, if you listen to me, you realize it's like Paul mentions that parable a lot. Yeah, because it's important. He says this is one of the most important parables. Some seed fell on good ground, some fell among thorns, some fell on stony ground, and some fell on the path. And what happens to those in the path? Well, the birds come and steal away the word which is sown in their hearts. The birds are symbolize Satan. But if Satan is stealing the word away from their hearts, that's a very simplistic... Jesus is going to the heart of things. And he's saying, Satan is disguised as a angel of light, therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be disguised as the ministers of righteousness. The unclean and hateful birds, to me, are tied back to that idea symbolically of the birds who steal the word away from men's hearts. The imprisoned within the whore are the unclean and the hateful birds, which are the clergy, your professional preachers, your professional hucksters, your professional deceivers. I don't mean all, whatever, but all them that are found in her, I mean all of you who end up with her, all of you end up running in her, and for convenience sake, it's like, well, my whole congregation is going after this. I have training, and I know the scriptures, and I kind of think that this might be a mistake, but I'm going to go along anyways because whatever. Or maybe it's just like, well, I know this is unbiblical, but hey, this is what's going on, and the ministers of Satan are the primary agents who steal the word away from men's hearts. Satan doesn't do a lot of this work himself. He uses his proxies, which are generally men in robes, in white robes, and black suits with white collars, and not to say each and every one of them, but among them, and we know this. We know that among the clergy are some unclean and evil people, because we see in creating those positions of power and authority in the church, what the church did by creating these positions to which you could be entered into merely based on training, not based on any life that you had lived. Say, well, this guy he's 50, he's raised a family, and they all give a good report. He has a good report of them around the place. This guy is a solid person. We're going to make him our leader. Instead, what we do is we say, we will train you at the university, and when you're 21, we'll make you our leader. Or 22, 23, 20. We'll make you associate pastor. Some organizations, I suppose, they must do it that way. But I've been in churches where it's like they are so desperate for clergy, and I understand this, they take guys right out of school. He's been trained. We take these people into positions of authority who have there's no logical, literal, they've been trained. All that says is they passed, they checked off boxes. It's funny, for wrestling, I had to do this special training for I don't know, don't yell at the kids or something like that. I forget, because it was a couple years ago. It was basically training course to not be a bad coach, like on several levels. Obviously, it was also to help spot grooming behaviors and stuff like that by bad actors within that. Because and the training was I took the test, aced it, all that. But just because I aced the test, that doesn't mean I even agree, right? It's not that I don't, but if I become a pastor, I could check off all the boxes. Like passing a test and being trained does not give anyone credentials. It gives them, well, we've trained them. But until they've lived another 30 years, how do you know they're actually really going to live and believe and live that way? You make them a pastor and you give them instantaneous respect. They just get respect right out the, we're ordained. And you see what trouble that led the Catholic Church into, ultimately. Because there's nothing preventing a non-believer from becoming a pastor or a priest. Nothing. All you have to do is, because you go through and you don't really have to prove yourself. In fact, it has been admitted there are many non-believing pastors and leaders in the churches. You can Google this. Look up atheist pastors, atheist preachers. They've been said that they literally, and there are newspaper articles where they're like, and they don't want to tell who they are because their congregation will flip out, but they're atheists leading congregations. Like I said, I've had this argument with atheists because it says, part of our problem is we're infiltrated by you people. Our authority structures are infiltrated by unbelievers. You really think it's belief in Christianity that leads priests to diddle little boys? No, it's their unbelievers, and they are led to do those things because they see a position of authority and trust, which is given without much of any. You don't have to earn it. You just put on the friggin' clothes, you get the education, and you get trusted. You get put in position of authority for that. There's no, you proved yourself over a lifetime of service. No, we'll just stick you right in there. And they wonder why they end up with pedophiles and adulterers and unclean and hateful birds. That's where they're all held up. That's where they're all caged up. Where do you want to find? Because why not? Why do you think they become coaches? Or, that's, well, I don't know. Personally, I see that'd be, that's why they train us to look for grooming behaviors. Because it's when we coach wrestling and stuff, it's man, there's a room full of people. Adults, children, there's a lot, there's no alone with the child, but then, a friend of mine was describing how that happens. In some instances, they, whatever. I'm not gonna get into the full description, but I get it. They use their position of authority, but what better position than that of a religious, holy person? We can certainly trust them because they are in cahoots with God, and they've been ordained as a holy man. You tell someone that someone's a pastor, they instantaneously get the respect of the office by most people. Even unbelievers will sort of have a sense. Even just being a Bible teacher, I get it sometimes. Family members will swear around me and apologize. And I'm like, what? Stop it. They'll use profanity. Nobody swears. Like I'm some holy creature around which it is dangerous or not dangerous or impropriety. It is improper to use profanity in the holy ears of Uncle Paul. Oh God, it's ridiculous, but it's true, and that's what happens. People in religious circles, they are given undue respect that they have not earned. Just by virtue of being trained. Oh. That's enough on the hateful birds. I do think of bad pastors, bad actors in the church, stealing the word away from men's hearts as being these hateful birds. Like, I have related a story my wife related to me from the first time, not the first time, but from the very first days of when I knew her. She told me how she had worked with a man who was the son of a pastor, and how he was studying to become a pastor. He was going to follow in his father's footsteps. His father was and that made him someone that she thought, well, I could ask questions of this guy. And she would ask him a lot of questions, and at some point he became frustrated and said, don't take it so seriously. It's just religion. Then his face he realized he'd said something he probably shouldn't say. But he was going to be a pastor. He's a pastor right now. Right now. He's drawing a salary, and there's a couple hundred probably people who look to him as the authority of God. And to him, your questions are, he'd tell a young and enthusiastic girl, don't take it too seriously. It's just religion. Religion is so dangerous, you better take it seriously. Don't just lightly hold religion. You know how dangerous that can be? I mean, you got to think about what you're believing. Faith is a dangerous thing. A little faith can move mountains, Jesus said, and that's not an exaggeration. A little faith can slaughter millions. You spread it around. Depends on what you put your faith in. And it certainly is not just religion. I mean, it is just religion, but I mean, it's mostly the don't take it seriously part. I mean, just religion is diminishing religion, of course. That's insulting in a sense, and that's not good. But it was not like, the way I see that is like, religion is what religion is. I mean, it's like, to say that was more foolishness. Like, because religion has a huge effect on people. Because, like, if you don't take your Christianity seriously, something else is going to fill in that space. I don't know that everyone, they say everyone has a God-shaped hole. I've never been a fan of that statement. But people believe in things. I'm sorry, this stupid monitor is like just jumping around. Stop. It's because of my knees. They're too big for this desk. Everything's made too small in this world. If you're over 6 feet tall, you know what I'm talking about. I lost my track. Whatever. Oh, religion. Yeah, it's more of like a sense of everyone has some sort of belief. They're going to believe in something. Even science becomes like a religion to people because they think that's the answer to everything. And what I say against science is very simply this. Science is completely subjective because it relies on your subjective observations. No, they're objective observations. No, everything you observe is subjective. And we call it objective because of assumptions we make about the nature of our observations. We measure consistency. The things, things are repeatable. It's like, well, if it's repeatable enough, we can believe that it is something that is true. It is true in meaning that the world in which we live is bound by those rules. That's all we're discovering. We're not discovering that those rules bind reality. Only that the world in which we are bound is subject to certain rules. We did it again. Okay. For all nations are drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, because of her actions in fornicating with Satan and abandoning, and basically betraying her betrothal to Christ. What was perhaps a virginal bride has become a great whore. And that fornication, the process of doing that, it's not merely the betrayal. It's like, man, she was drunken with the blood of saints. In her is found all this uncleanness, all this wickedness. All this sin is hid in her. It's not just the betrayal. Like I said, it's like, without the blood of Christ genuinely cleansing you, meaning your faith is in him, and sort of the covenant between God and you is not just claimed by you, but honored by God. And the New Testament makes clear that, like, the thought that, like, God just automatically just honors that covenant on anyone who claims it is a delusion. The talents, the sower, the wedding feast, there are all kinds of parables that refute that. And also just, it's implied throughout the New Testament, that the idea that there could be a falling away. The idea that, well, as in 2 Peter chapter 1 it says, if you do these things, you shall never fail or fall. One of the other. I think it may actually be in Greek fall, but translated fail, or vice versa. I don't know. As much as it's funny because I wrote that into a song, but I still do not have it completely memorized. Because I don't spend as much time. I wish I could spend like an hour every day just playing my guitar and practicing, but that's just not the world I currently live in. This works for me because it is live and it's like I'm forced to do it. I can't pre-record it and then procrastinate about editing it and stuff. No, it just goes out the way it is. I don't think live streaming me practicing the guitar would be a good idea. Well, maybe it would. At least for me. It may not be good for people who watch. They'd be like, what is this garbage? Because watching someone write music or practice can be it's like watching sausage made. Can be very unpleasant. It's one of the reasons why when the last couple songs I wrote outside the house in a little tiny corner out in the barn in a closed-in room because I like to feel like I'm alone, so no one has to listen to the awful things that will be heard as one kind of struggles their way through the creative process. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The merchants of the earth are waxed rich to the abundance of her delicacies. So she falls away to Satan, but in that she also rises with him in his kingdom. He rises up out of the sea and she rides upon him. He rises out of the bottomless pit. He rises out of the earth. He arises. He comes to power. He goes up and she's riding him all the way to power. And riding obviously has at least in our language, it has a sexual connotation. She's riding him, she's riding the beast. She's riding him all the way to power. And it says fornication. She rides the beast. She's to straddle him. They have committed fornication with her. Either they've also been having intercourse with her spiritually, or through her intercourse led them to have intercourse in a spiritual sense. It's interesting to me, I get emails from time to time. I haven't been answering emails lately, to tell you the truth, in my old email box about Shepherd's Chapel and things like that. Because, I don't know, I guess I just got sick of it, It's like, I already answered this, and I'm not going to get into a deep argument with another person saying the same things again and again, who doesn't bother to read what I already said about that. And so that mercy has flown. It's gone. There's no guarantee replies on that front. If you write in regards to the study, you will get a reply. If you write to questions@oraclesofgod.org, not the old contact address, which I'm in the process of phasing out, but no questions. That's what you send it to. And you might want to subscribe and click on the like button, or you may want to visit oraclesofgod.org for hundreds of hours of studies, or dozens. I think I forgot if it's hundreds there, but if I throw in the studies here, we've got hundreds, okay? Because I was looking at this is video 186, I think. And so that's somewhere above 180 hours, so yippee. Multiplying time talking about these things is not so difficult. Not at all. I enjoy it. So, I forgot what I was talking about before we took the break, but fornication, yeah. Spiritual fornication. It is interesting to me that the Shepherd's Chapel folks occasionally will write me and they'll say, oh, well, what about 2 Corinthians 10 or 11? 2 Corinthians, as this, I have espoused you as chaste virgins to Christ. Why don't we bring that up? Because throughout Revelation we haven't really brought up the scripture. So let's bring it up. And here we go. Ta-da! All right, but I don't want Revelation 17. I want 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Verse 2. For I am jealous. Well, he's in. I don't know why I always got to get way too much context on these things. I guess because I'm a very... I'm a bit of a stickler for context, meaning I like to take things in context, unless they can be taken out of context, because some things are just axiomatic. Like whom he wills, he he chooses whom he wills, and whom he wills he hardens. So, but here, let's just look at it. For I am jealous of you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin of Christ. In the previous verse, he just says, I want you to really bear with me, if I'm foolish. I have espoused you to a chaste virgin to Christ. As a chaste virgin, you are espoused. A chaste virgin, not a fornicating whore. A chaste virgin. But I fear, lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, and they will say the word beguiled there means wholly seduced, and that means sexually, because there is a sexual vibe here, isn't there? As chaste virgins, you don't want to be seduced, you little chaste virgin, right? By the serpent. I mean, and also, I mean, you think about the serpent. He is the serpent, and metaphorically, the serpent and the male sexual organ are of a kind, right? I mean, that's not far out. But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity in Christ. But he makes it quite clear, this is about mental corruption. And even Eve, that word beguiled, I did on oraclesofgod.org. Here's one of the, it's funny, my website is kind of odd in some ways, because I purposely, oh, that's funny, I didn't even transition yet. Boom. That's what it should look like. Now, this is what it should look like. All right. So, to find this, I don't even remember. How do you find Arnold Murray on my website? You can't find it on the studies page. You can go to the doctrine page, I believe. And then you kind of scroll down. And the only reason I'm doing this is for the sake of this one verse in Corinthians, and because of the concept of fornication in a spiritual sense. So, oh, is it on the questions page? That's funny. I'm like looking at it, I'm like, okay, not on studies page or doctrine page. Is it on the questions page? I think that's where it is. Questions page, which never got really developed. Shepherd's Chapel questions. There we go. And that's how you search Shepherd's Chapel thing. Of course, you can just search my name in Shepherd's Chapel. But that's how you get to this page. Now on this page, I have this little article I wrote right here. Does expadio, that's not how you pronounce that, but that's how my Arnold Murray, my original teacher, who I reject, pronounces it for some reason. Exapata? I say exapatio, or I forgot. Exapatao. That spelling is wrong too. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, expadio. It's not spelled like that at all. I mean, it's definitely not how you pronounce that. So you click on that and it get this, I'm talking about beguiled. And I did this word study on the word beguiled and all its uses in the New Testament. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a pretty thorough study. It's a little word study. Seduced there does not mean sexually seduced. But of course, it can mean sexually. I can deceive the heart of a young girl. It's like, that's not that you can't use deceit in a sexual context. And that's what we have here in 2 Corinthians is deceit is not, the word seduced has no sexual connotation. It has a sexual context, which is the context of a chaste virgin. But that is a spiritual context because we're not literally, well, we're neither literally, at least we adults who are married are not literally virgins and not literally espoused to Christ in that sense, right? I mean, it's not being silly. We are neither literally virgins nor literally espoused to him. So when he says, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds might be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. Maybe I should do my study in this format the whole time. Now as I'm looking at it, I'm like, it'd be a lot more interesting. Oh, maybe it would, I don't know. But I fear by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he that cometh preacheth another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or if you receive another spirit, which ye have not received, or another gospel, which ye have not accepted, you might well bear with him. He's saying, I wish you could bear with me. I'm jealous over you. I'm afraid. And if someone came along preaching something else, you might bear with them. So please bear with me if I'm foolishness. I think if they came along preaching another Jesus, you might listen to him. And then he goes on to explain why he's afraid of this. And we're not going to get into that. But the idea is basically preaching another Jesus could violate this sense that we are espoused to Christ as chaste virgins. That falling away from that espousal by another Jesus, because it's not just the name of Jesus. It's not good enough. The name of Jesus, like I've always said, the name has much more to do with his fame, reputation, and not just that, his person. I used to in my youth, I took a more of an intellectual approach to Christianity, but as I grew older, I understood the wisdom of those who were saying who would emphasize the relationship. You must have some sort of interaction with God. That is part of what faith in Christ, means you believe he's really there. So you got to talk to him, seek him out, look for his communications, try to understand, put forth. And if it's not in you, I don't know how to make it happen. Like I said, when I was young, I believed, but I didn't have the zeal. It wasn't, I guess it was, when I went to college and I saw the futility of the things of the world and pursuing after them, that it became, that I got my zeal. Also, in that, I've described how one evening I thought I was going to die from my excesses, and I turned to God, and I made a promise that I'd never made, which is that I would, if he would spare my life, I would serve him, and so for the rest of my life. And I wasn't sure what form that would take, but then ever after, I was looking how I could fulfill that promise. Because I was always a sincere believer, but I just didn't know what sincere belief should look like. It wasn't clear to me that sincere belief was supposed to be some form of service. For all of us, there's some form of service that we must do. Offering our bodies as a living sacrifice, that is your reasonable service. Meaning we don't be the people we would be otherwise. We sacrifice our lives. I mean, I'm not, I didn't become an attorney and get rich and, well, I've got the trophy wife. Never mind. I had to say that. And do all the things that the guys who marry, or not marry, who live those lives. I'm not living the life of a person who pursues covetousness and the things of the world. I'm living the life of one who pursues oneness with Christ, right? But there was another life I could have had, another life I could have lived. But it would be entirely different from the life I'm living. And that's what I'm talking about with clergy and stuff. It's like, I don't know how you put trust and authority in these people, and they haven't lived a life yet to see what kind of, are they sacrificing? Oh, they are. They became priests. They're it's like, how do you know they even care about getting married? I mean, like, a job that requires you to not be married and puts you in proximity and authority over children, oh, that's not going to be attractive to creepy people at all. Like, those creepy people aren't going to be willing to just go and learn all the rigmarole about the church to become these highly respected members of the community who get entrusted with things and who people will be afraid to speak out against until the whole system comes crumbling down. But until, can you imagine how much they've gotten away with over the centuries? I mean, part of the Reformation was the fact that this was known. Not just that aspect of it, that salacious sort of, like I said, when I think of the Catholic Church, I do not just think of those priests. I think of all those people, the good people in the congregation who are suffering because what? Well, because the whole leadership of their church is condensed at this top structure, the bishops and the cardinals, all those guys, And it's no wonder, they should be held accountable. Bring them down. I don't know, but I do feel for the common Catholic folk. It's like, it makes me feel defensive of them, because it's like they've got a bunch of unbelieving, it was their faith in Christianity which led them to do what they did. No. No. Not by a long shot. Let's see, Matthew, no, it makes no sense. She has an abundance of delicacies. We're not going to dwell on that now, because they're going to talk a lot about the delicacies. The merchandise of gold and of silver and of precious stones and pearls and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We will get to that part. And now, I heard another voice from, this is a good way to conclude the study. There's a nice little section here. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities." Oops, there goes my scriptures. Come back. Reward, that might be where we pick up next time. Reward her even as you rewarded you. Yeah, I think so. Let's just talk about these verses for a few moments. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." See, her sins, it's not just that the fornication, the betrayal, the worshiping Antichrist is but one of her sins. And as I was talking about the other day, the churches are filled with sin and iniquity. From the top down, I mean, from the pastors to the lay people, it is just saturated with sin. because their doctrines do not lead them to righteousness. And the way they set things up requires, and it does two things. The way their system works, there is a strong motivation to hide sin, right? A strong motivation to hide sin, and a strong motivating factor to prioritize sinfulness. To prioritize. This is one of the reasons, like, if you listen to my studies, especially older ones, I do not show the same amount of sympathy as I have in the past, but I do still believe it's like, if it seems like I speak more against, like, things like homosexuality or something like that, if it seems like I say more against it now, it's not because I've changed my mind. It's just, people say, well, it's an abomination. So is lying. Lying is an abomination to the Lord. It's like, they say, well, Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah. Read Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah is not the way our society is currently operating, though they would like to go that way. I mean, some people would. Believe it or not. I mean, that may sound like a ridiculous claim, but among the ungodly, like, we get that. I don't want to talk about. I hate talking about popular things going on, but the transgender people, they want you to just have to accept, not just on a level of, like, they're your neighbor, on the level of, like, well, you shouldn't have a problem dating someone like that. That's what the level of corruption they expect. And that is almost, that is getting towards, there's still a long way from Sodom and Gomorrah, but when the expectation is that you, the unwilling person, are somehow wrong for not being willing to just go along with their perversion, corruption, abomination, whatever. But they're, because, I mean, it's like a corruption of reality, a twisting of nature, of a bending of the binary nature of humanity, to bend it and to twist it and to turn it and to do things like that. And then they corrupt nature, and then they expect you to go along with it. And that's kind of like Sodom and Gomorrah, because it was sort of like, hey, come out here, we want to know you, and you will submit to this. We want to know them, bring them out. We want it. So, your consent is not important, and your feelings about it are not important. What we want is all that matters. We demand this of you. And that is sort of leading down the road. But in the churches, they prioritize sins for a long time, especially now. I think it's changing to some, or I hear it changing among Christians. They're taking on, and they're swinging too far, of course. Instead of an attitude of tolerance, which isn't, now they consider tolerance insulting. They don't want to be tolerated, they want to be accepted. But instead of taking on the attitude of tolerance, or maintaining it, for those of us who have always been tolerant of people who, because sin is sin. People have sin problems, and as long as they're not making their sins, their sins are not going and affecting other people. As long as they are, even if you're sitting in company together, consenting, I'm going to tolerate it because it's like, I don't think I have any other choice. It's the right thing to do, is to tolerate people. Now, in the church, though, is different. In the church, we ought not tolerate such things, right? But we don't tolerate. What we do is we forgive and demand better of people. We demand people be better, but we do forgive the repentant. But in the church, in our churches, there's a much wider, I think, acceptance now. Certainly, I mean, not so much among fundamentalists or conservative churches, but even some conservative churches that maybe wouldn't be described as fundamentalist. They're moving from tolerance to acceptance. At some point they're going to want to force people. They're going to want to force religious figures to perform the marriages, which again is not Sodom and Gomorrah, but the imposition of that, of making me participate in your sins, is very much like Sodom and Gomorrah. You're getting into Sodom and Gomorrah territory. Things are moving along, no doubt. But this verse calls. What was my point in all that? I guess that in the church, there's, sort of hierarchies of sins. On one hand, we hide our sins. We hide the bad ones. So we don't want anyone to know about that. That gets hidden. But then other things just are tolerated. And and then you would take something that is categorized as abominable, like lying. Imagine if in the church we were going to say, lying is okay, just in front of everybody to lie. No. But they do lie in front of everybody. But it's just, that's one of the things that you don't acknowledge or you hide. Lies are hidden all the time because that's the nature of lies. That's why they're so hateful. Because it is speaking with your mouth. The mouth, the words. By words, God created the heavens and the earth. What kind of hell on earth can you create with lies? I'll tell you, one hell of a hell can be created with lies. With the lips, the tongue could no man tame. It is set on fire of hell. And that is Gehenna. It is set on fire of the fire that burns evermore. It does a lot of damage the tongue can do with lies. But because they don't preach doctrines which bring us to a more righteous state, and they don't even really believe in it, not in all cases, but they don't believe in pursuing the holy standard, the standard of holy, the standard of perfect, the standard of no sin. Like, that is what we're aiming at. You have to aim at no sin to get anywhere close to it. If you aim to mostly not sinful, that's my aim. Well, I'm already there. It's not good enough. I promise you it's not good enough. And it's not that to earn salvation either good enough. What I mean, it's just not good enough for me as a Christian. Is for what I want to present to my Lord. And that, unless I actually obtain perfection, that never ends. You don't get to step away from that and say, good enough. But most of them in the churches, they have sort of stepped away and say, look, just as I am. That's good enough. Do you have to just accept me the way I am? I'm not going to change a thing. Because I understand the meaning of just as I am. It doesn't mean that. Meaning, I'm going to come to you right now without trying to fix myself. I'm going to come to you, Lord, and believe in you and look to you for salvation right now, in spite of the fact that I'm unclean, I'm not worthy, I'm not good. I'm lacking in all these important categories that would make me worthy of heaven. I know I'm not worthy. And I come to you without a plea. I don't have any plea. I don't have any excuses. I'm just coming to you as I am. I believe in that, absolutely. But the idea that at the end of that's where I start. Now I'm going to live my next 50 years as a Christian. And then I'm going to still be just, I'm still, when I enter into the kingdom, I'm still just as I am, just as I was at the beginning of the process. That is not acceptable. You can't come to God as you were at the beginning. Are you kidding me? After 50 years, that's the dude with one talent. He comes, look I've got it here. This is what I started out with, the one talent thing you gave me. I buried it for 50 years. You know what I mean? I was a Christian and I buried it. I didn't actually do anything with it, but I was in church all the time, every week. And here you have your faith you wanted from me. That's the guy with the one talent. It's dangerous. Dangerous. Foolish. That's, it's funny that that's going to cost people eternal life. It's not funny, but I mean, it's like, it's, wow. You know? I mean, what, they thought that was really going to be acceptable? Why? Oh, because the whore told him so. Because the whore, with all these corrupt teachers and preachers who do not know God nor the gospel and haven't lived it themselves and received it of men who did not live it. You know what I mean? They received it of corruption, and into corruption they shall go. Come out of her. You know, I often tell people it's okay to go to church. There's a few names even in Sardis which have not defiled their garments. I always think to myself, I should, I know a guy, he's a Christian, I should go to his church sometime. I haven't done it in a long time. Last time I was in church was probably a funeral or something. I don't usually go there voluntarily. Because it's like, there's no place for me. The only place I ever had a place, I had to leave. I've had a place. I'm sure I could find a place somewhere else where they could use my gifts and it would be appreciated, whatever. But for now, I serve here in the wilderness, My people, they be not partakers of her sins. Because you go in, you become part of those churches. Come out of her. The call is made. Come out of Babylon. If you find a good church, by all means, stay. It's not that there aren't good ones. But the big organizations are going to tend towards corruption. Because maybe you get a good pastor, right? Well, he passes away and he's replaced by his son, who's not a good pastor. Look at Samuel, the man of God. His sons were absolutely worthless. Worse than that. Worse than that. They were worse than useless. They're absolute garbage. If you partake of her sins, you're in danger of receiving of her plagues. And her sins have reached it. That's, there you go. A metaphor and a hyperbole in one sentence. Her sins have reached to heaven. Oh, literally, if you piled them up on top, sins don't reach. Sins are like events in history. But if they could be quantified, if we could, like I said, if you took $1 trillion and stacked it up, how far into space it would reach or whatever. If you took $1 trillion in $1 bills, you could go to the moon or whatever. I don't know exactly what the numbers are on that. Okay. $1 trillion is a lot. Their sins have reached to heaven. They're so numerous. And also so large. Big sins, metaphorically or, metaphor. Well, what is it? Am I thinking symbolically, metaphorically? Oh, whatever. Pardon me if I'm misusing that word here, because I know a metaphor is when you say something is something else. It is not really a metaphor. But the idea that sins, like having size or importance or relative better or worse, because there is a distinction. You know what I mean? Lying and homosexuality are both abominations. And the way in which you lie, some lies are much more sinful than others, aren't they? A lie that gets someone killed is not the same as a lie that saves someone's life. There you go. Easy. And homosexual, two guys, it's not so big a deal as Sodom and Gomorrah. Someone unwilling, pressuring, forcing, whatever. Well, the idea is that the sins add up. Little, small, big. Big or small, they add up and they stack up and they reach up. Her sins have reached to heaven. I almost remember in Sodom and Gomorrah there was something like that. This whole part, they will burn her with fire. They will cause her to become burned with fire because they will encourage and promote her sins, they will help her along. Well, we'll continue in this chapter tomorrow. There's a lot to be said about it. We could dwell here, and we'll dwell here as long as it takes, you know, as long as it takes to say everything that the Spirit would like said, as far as I'm concerned. So, thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I only got 2 tracks here for chapter 18, so here's the other one I got. I'll make more tomorrow.